And I remember seeing for the first time, I was telling Scotty, I just recalled it, the two bodies together in front of me. And literally, I had to walk outside and I almost was sick.
Warning, this episode may contain content that is not suitable for children. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome to LED Live. So you wake up one day and you're working in the porn industry. What is that really like?
Find out on this episode of LED Live.
You guys are gonna like this topic today. In fact, we've been talking about pornography on our show from time to time, and it's something that we feel passionate about. There's a lot of people that this industry affects, touches, and today's topic really, I have a friend that I want to introduce you to. John, welcome to the show. John, I've known for a few years now, and I actually did not know the extent of your involvement in this industry until we actually chatted the other day. I mean, I remember talking with you a little bit, and you had kind of mentioned, that you had a run-in with the porn industry, but I didn't know at what level that transpired to be. So I'm excited to bring you guys a very interesting story and topic. John, welcome to our show.
Thank you, Scotty. It's good to be here, bro. Good to be here. Like I said, I've been here 1,000 times or 100 times, but to be inside of it, it's really cool. And yeah, one of the reasons you had said before we came on live, Scotty had a prayer for us. He had talked about the idea of keeping some of our stuff in the rearview mirror and not bringing it forward. And I know one of the reasons why it's not an advertisable thing in my life is I feel that way. I know when I first sort of came across, I noticed myself talking to people as if it was a positive, because even in my Christian experience, but it's very, it's hard to separate that. And so I noticed as I gave my testimony, I felt over time that there was this thing about, isn't this cool what I did and what I've done, right? And so I sort of just stopped making that a part of what I was saying, because it was just difficult. So, but I was excited about the opportunity to sort of expose or bring my experience to bear, because this is everywhere. This is prevalent, and I've seen statistics. It's not just prevalent in our society, it's prevalent in our church, right? So
that's right. I think if everyone were to be honest, I've heard numbers as high as 90% in the 90s% of people actually interact with this. I'm sure there's nobody sitting at this table that has never been exposed to this. If we're all honest, this is a business that has affected a lot of people. And like the devil likes to do, he likes to get in the middle of our relationships. And this is one of those things that just really attacks a core fundamental thing about humanity. We've always heard that food and sex are the two things that you need in life, right? Well, for most people, if you're married, yes. But God designed us to have this chemical bond with people, and in a special way done underneath the umbrella that God has specifically set up. And the devil just takes that, twists it, taints it, and puts it out there in this fantasy world. And so I think, a lot of people fantasize about what this industry really is, or what it's about, or what's even involved in it. So it's not every day that you get to talk with somebody that's actually worked behind the scenes in this. So I'm a little excited to kind of get into your story.
So I just want to say one thing before we jump into that. I was doing a talk recently, and I did a little bit of research for it, and found out that during what you might call, what people were saying, like the height of the pandemic in the US, it was like February, March type range. Depending on the country you're in, the traffic to Pornhub increased between 4 and 24%.
Wow. Wow.
Now, if you're a business, do the math. A 4% all the way up to a 24% increase, you'd be super excited.
Yeah.
Right? That represents a lot of people, though. And so what are they doing with their time?
Yeah.
Right? All the extra time that they have? Well, there's at least 4 to 24% of the population that was, going to that.
And you shared a stat with us a while back about the viewership of Pornhub, how it's like YouTube and Netflix.
It was greater than like Instagram or Twitter or something.
Yeah.
Staggering.
And what's crazy too is the age that I think people are actually accidentally, and I say that accidentally, getting exposed to it is becoming lower
Yeah,
and
and
lower.
younger.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I can remember the first time that topic was brought up, where I actually saw some photographs or something. I was probably third grade. Was about the time that I remember first being exposed to it. And I have now since heard, I mean, I just had a conversation in the kitchen the other day of a lady that works here, and a 4-year-old was telling her about his exposure, and it's like 4 years old. I can't even fathom that. So this is a much needed topic, and I'm curious to see a little window behind what's actually going on in that industry. So tell us a little story.
A little framework. Sorry.
Yeah, how'd you get involved in all this?
Exactly. So I was the time frame for my involvement in the pornography industry was in the late 80s, between like sort of 85, 86 through 89 or 90. There were probably 2 years in there was really hardcore, and before and after were sort of peering in and petering out. So at the time there was lots of video going on. The internet was just getting started, and so what happened was my brother-in-law, my sister married a gentleman from Indiana who had a mail order company, and he had figured out a way to send out ads, and he was making a lot of money in mail order. And so he decided some of the guys that he was buying from realized how well he was doing and started jacking his prices up. So he decided to come on the coast and shoot his own product. And so he came on the coast, and when he came out here, I was living here in California, and he's sort of a shy, retiring man, if you can think about it that way. And he sort of lived vicariously through me. My personality was a little brighter. I was a little bit more sort of LAized. And so he took me under his wing, and at the time I was doing nothing, everything I was doing was nefarious. It was sort of buy low, sell high, typical LA lifestyle, figuring out where you can make some money. And so when he came to me with the proposition, he said, listen, why don't you just go on one of the sets and just be a production assistant, right? Just to sort of get me involved. And so he hooked me up with a director named Ron Jeremy, which he was working with. And so I went on the set with Ron, and I was his production assistant and sort of, doing little things here and there. And I want to stop there. I told Scotty the other day, and I'd forgotten about this, but the first time he brought me on a set, they had rented a suite in the Beverly Hills Hotel, and they had blacked all the windows out, and they were doing a movie up there in one of the bungalows. And I remember seeing for the first time, I was telling Scotty, I just recalled it, the two bodies together in front of me, and literally, I had to walk outside, and I almost was sick. Now, I'm 23, 24 years old. I am as pagan as they come. I have every bad habit in the world. This should not appall me. But my Christian background, and I just looking at that, and I did not expect it. It wasn't something that I thought was going to happen. I walked in there with like, yeah, what's going on, guys? I'm part of this. And I watched, and it moved me viscerally. It was a weird situation. So it took me a while to get acclimated to what I was seeing in front of me. So I started production assisting a little bit, and then I started directing. And so for a couple of years, I was Leisure Times director of movies.
So that was kind of a fast transition there. It went like from mail order to next thing, you're directing. Like, did you know what you were getting into? I mean, it was, oh yeah, I just need you to come in and be a director. Or did you know, oh yeah, this is a porn shoot?
So truth be told, I had done some nefarious business with my brother-in-law. He had a lot of money. I always needed a lot of money. And so I had done some stuff, and I found myself on the wrong end of the ledger card. And so it was actually an invitation for me to work off some of the money I had taken from him. And so he was bringing me in just to sort of, it wasn't me looking to get into the business. It was him using his relationship with me to get me in there, because he liked to share, like when we come off of sets, the first thing we would do is, John, let's go to lunch. How did it go? Tell me about so-and-so. Tell me about so-and-so. And he'd like to live it through my eyes. And I realized after a couple of lunches, that's what was happening here. I was his proxy into what was the world going on there. And so it was like that more, Keith. It wasn't that I was transitioning from a mail order model into a video model. He had just asked me to come in there and work off some money that I owed him. And then pretty soon it grew beyond that.
Isn't that interesting how, like, when you first get exposed to like some very dark sin or something, right? Yeah. That there's this natural inclination to be like repulsed by it or shy away from it. I mean, I remember the first time I smoked cigarettes, I turned green as that color on this light in this table right here. I mean, I was green. Why would I do it again?
Your body
doesn't make
and it's
sense.
like you're like a dog, keep returning to the vomit, and it's like pretty soon you look forward to the vomit, and then you're eating it shortly thereafter. So you're getting involved in this. You're 25 years old. Where does this lead? Where is it going?
So, in my heart of hearts, being, having had a Christian background, but again, having no Christian worldview and having no Christian future, I was absolutely, paganized. I knew I didn't want to spend the rest of my life being involved with this stuff. I was very fortunate in that growing up, pornography wasn't part of my, was one of my sin sets, if you will. I had drug issues, I had smoking issues, I had, honesty issues. Pornography wasn't one of them. I think I'd seen one video, and as ironically, I worked with her like a year into I was like, wow, you're the only person I've ever seen do this before. So I wasn't looking at it as a career path. I was looking at it to make money. And to be honest with you, it was kind of heady at the time. Most of the folks that were in my position were much older than I, not in as good a shape as I. I was just sort of, I was an outlier, and I was enjoying the adoration, et cetera. I knew it was short-lived. I knew I wasn't going to be here forever. I had a wife and 3 kids at the time. And so I was coming home, I was going to make movies. I couldn't tell my children, what kind of movies I made. Thank God they were younger. So I didn't really have to have those conversations with them. But as they were getting older through this process, it became more and more, the 6-year-old became 8 and wanted to know why dad was going to San Francisco for 3 days. He's going to make movies. Well, what kind of movies? When can I watch them? Type of thing.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how is your wife with this? I mean, is she okay with you actually producing these videos?
Interesting, my wife was part of the family, so she knew, Mark, and she knew everybody. So, the wife part of her wasn't happy. But having said that, it's a different show for you. But there are relationships where one person just wants to keep the other person so badly that they're willing to turn a blind eye to things. It was sort of like that, right? And so it's sort of a don't ask, don't tell type of a thing, So.
Man, that's got to be a hard position to be in, because I think about my own marriage, and there's just so much intimacy there that you want, to have that person know all the little details of your life, and have an area or a corner that it's like, okay, this is off limits, and it seems like that would just be a bad situation from the onset. But praise God, you're here. I mean, you've obviously come out of that. So what kind of brought you out of this?
That's a great question. So as I progressed through and became less and less enamored with what was going on, because anything becomes work after a while, right? And so if you take a trip up to Big Bear for 4 days and you're tasked with making 4 movies, and you have grips and gaffers and lighting people and talent, and these talent, they're always doing drugs in the back room, and they're not reliable. It becomes a chore as well, right? And so it became a little bit of a grind like that as well. But I was making really, really good money. My brother-in-law was taking great care of me, and I could work my own hours. So it was sort of like that. But what really began to wear at me was my children began to grow up. My oldest daughter, her name is is Summer, and she was 6, and then she was 7, and then she was 8. And so I started looking at the girls on the set, guys, as them. I realized that each woman on my set was somebody's daughter. I mean, literally speaking, I held my daughter in my arms, and I started picturing each of the girls on the set at some point had a father and mother who looked at their life and their life trajectory and was excited about whatever was going to happen in their lives. Were they going to be an attorney? Were they going to be, what they were going to be? And I realized that they were 18, they were 21, they were 23, and they were in my room, and I was filming them having sex with other men. And it just began to grate on me that somewhere out there was a John whose daughter, and I started thinking about my daughter, and just putting all the ends together, it began to really wear on me in such a way that, I was in my, again, mid-20s making great money, and I walked away. That was the reason. I just could no longer look at myself in the mirror, come to work. I saw them differently. And so when you see them differently, you don't see them as animals. You don't see them as something that's a means to an end. If you start connecting with them through your heart, you're gonna get stuck. I mean, you have stuff to get through. You have scenes to do. You have things that need to happen, and you cannot see them as people. And so I just called my brother-in-law one day, and he would, I would get tired after shows, and he would drive down. I lived in Cerritos at the time, and he would knock on the door and wake me up and tell my wife, "You write me more checks," but tell John to come out of retirement, because I would, I'd leave, because it was not only physically exhausting, it was emotionally and spiritually exhausting, as I began that new trek. And then one day I just said, "I'm done. And I just said, it's over.
Emptying you. You know, you bring up a really good point. I think that a lot of people don't see, they see the facade of pornography. They see the only one side of it. They actually don't see the person that's behind that window. And maybe you can kind of speak to this for a little bit, and maybe you guys have some questions. Yeah. But I've heard that a large portion of these girls, especially in today's pornography world, are trafficked. And they're not there voluntarily. They don't want to be there. I mean, literally off of the set, their handlers are sitting there forcing them to do those things. And to the viewers, it's like, if you just had that mentality, like, this could be my sister. This could be my daughter. This could be, somebody that I know very well. And you would begin to see them as different, and hopefully that would repulse you from wanting to engage in that. Because really, if nobody watched it, nobody was involved in it, nobody bought it,
there
would be no industry.
Mm-hmm. And to piggyback off of that, you actually said you had to change your perspective from viewing these people as animals to actual human beings. Can you speak to how the talent, as you call them, are treated, especially when a monetary value is added on their worth?
Absolutely. That's a great question, Kinda. I'll respond to that by saying this. I'll sort of give you a gateway or a better frame. So at the time that I was working, there was a talent model, an agency, it was a porn agency called World Modeling. It was in Van Nuys on Van Nuys Boulevard. And so what they would do is they put ads in papers across the country saying, come to Hollywood, be a star. And they would track them that way. So there's no handlers, there was no, forced sort of slavery. Having said that, slavery doesn't have to be bondage, right? You can be enslaved to your dreams and your aspirations, your desires to be seen as a human being, your desires to be a part of something bigger than you. And so these girls would come, they'd flock in, and we'd go to the modeling agency, and we had little cards we'd fill out, and we'd take pictures of them. And then when we do shows, we would go through our files and look. And so invariably these girls, like I said, they weren't trafficked. So obviously I was friendly. Obviously there was an interaction going on there. But to your question, I began to look beyond the response to see what was in her eyes, her emotions. And I realized there's a lot of things I wasn't seeing. If I was asking someone to do something, I wasn't seeing. There was a little bit of a reticence. There was a little bit of a void back there. And I'm not sure if I projected that or if I just was blind to it earlier. But our interactions became more, I began to analyze them more and realize that there was a lot of holes back there. One of the things I talked to Scotty about before the show is, everyone grows up with a hole in the heart that's God-shaped, as we say, right? God has this, we have a need for affirmation, need for validation, need for purpose, right? All those things are in our hearts. And pornography for these actors, the talent, as I call them, that's just a way to fill that void, right? And so these girls are filling that void, and many of them came from sexually abused backgrounds. Many of them came from backgrounds where their fathers had left. There was the pain and misery index, if you really were to read it correctly, which, like I said, I did not initially, was off the charts, both for boys and girls. And so I guess to answer that question is I began to note that pain and misery index in a way that had them looking like wounded individuals rather than, I was telling Scotty earlier, they come on the set saying, I'm free. Society out there puts these bondages on you. You have these handcuffs about purity and being puritanical. We don't play that. We're free of all that. So they come with this liberty and this sort of joy, this fake joy. But when you drill into it, you realize that they're just in bondage to something different. They're not free. They're as free as the drug addict is free from his drugs. They're as free as the alcoholic is free from their alcohol, right? They're not free. And so I began to notice those sorts of things in the background. Just to sort of riff on what, and then you can stop me for questions whenever you want to. The lifespan of these girls is very short. I would call them killer and filler. When you do a video, you need someone to put on the box cover. She's filler. She gets paid, considerably more than the rest of the girls. The rest of the ones we called filler, and I don't say that pejoratively. It's just we called it killer and filler. And so the filler girls, the killer girls could go, 12 months, 18 months, as long as your video went out and it sold lots of copies, you could make another movie as killer and command the high rate. The moment that video went down, you're no longer anything. Some transcended, the Tracy Lords of the world, sort of transcended, but that was their life. The filler, oh, wow. I mean, 8-9 months. And again, we're talking that, their shelf life has nothing to do with their value or their quality. their shelf life has to do with money and whether or not they can be marketed. And so if you're a filler with nothing other than your willingness to do certain things, you're 6, 7, 8 months and you're done, right? It's not at your whim. You can't extend your stay there because you have value or quality.
And when you mean done, do you mean like these girls are like wrecked, not only emotionally, but drugs, strung out, like their life has just fallen apart and they are literally valueless?
I was gonna sort of bifurcate that. If they weren't done with respect to or relative to someone hiring them, they were done in the way you just described, Scotty. And some of them both at the same time. Drug use rampant on the sets. When I hired grips and gaffers, I used to, I made arrangements with them to make sure that they were allowed to come on the set and ply their business, but not to the guys and not before the scenes, right? Because it was going to happen. I just had to control it and monitor it to my advantage, right? So yes, and for us, we know what that is, right? That's guilt, that's shame, that's what who told you were naked? That's what that is, right? And they don't see it as that, and so they see it as freedom, and then drugs and alcohol numb that pain and turn it into quote unquote joy and celebration but it's a killer.
Yeah, you're saying all this and I'm reminded of the episode we did with Chad and how he brought all these statistics, and participating in sexual acts in excess actually reduces your happiness, actually wears you down, whether you're in this industry or maybe even the privacy of your own home. So keeping that in mind, that it's scientifically proving what you're saying. Science is backing up what you're saying about the lifespan, so to speak, of these people who are participating in that world in excess. But I had a follow-up question to the question I asked before, because you were addressing the internal turmoil that these girls were going through. But when you were talking about the first time you were ever on set, you were repulsed by what was going on. If you watch any like sci-fi or action film, a lot of the times the set looks very different from what you see on screen. Like it looks flashy and beautiful and all of that. I was wondering, and how it was actually filmed is just in this like green box, and the actor has to like visualize to make it look realistic. Is it the same in that world where on screen it looks flashy and nice and beautiful, but in reality, the people who are actually there filming, it's actually pretty bad?
Identical. And first of all, just full disclosure, my brother-in-law was known as the actually Alex will know this, the coda, right? So they are the coda of he was the coda of the porn industry. He made things on very small budgets, and so I wasn't working with great sets, and I did what I could. But to your point, so when you edit something, it can look beautiful with music and good-looking bodies doing whatever they do. To get that footage, you stop just like anybody else does, and you cut and you say, you move your left leg and you do this. And you can see it's not pretty, it's not fun. I mean, so yes, it's very, and I love your point, Candy, because it does wear them down. I mean, I suppose if you just were to capture somebody doing what they do, that'd be one level of degradation. But when you stop and you break it down, you make them do this, and I mean, one of the things I had to stop doing when I came off the set was I realized that I was so acclimated to saying certain things that you say on a set about moving objects and doing with body parts. It took me 6 to 12 months to not have that as part of my vocabulary or hear it in a way that was nails on a chalkboard, because for years that's what I did. And so, and I won't, you can just imagine what they are. So that's what they're getting every day in every moment as they film what they're filming. And it has to be just as degrading for them.
It's so satanic to think about something so beautiful that God designed. I mean, something that is meant to stick you together. And keep in mind, these are actors. Yeah. There's a reason why they call them actors, right? They're acting. This is not a pleasurable experience for probably many of them, right? I mean, they're not totally into this. This is a job like anything else, and what they're portraying is this like fantasy world of like they're really enjoying this and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, I've never been on set before, but I've heard enough pieces and parts of the puzzle to know that they're not having fun. This is not fun to them.
So I have a question. You mentioned previously that you guys would put an ad out and the talent would respond to those ads. And then, you'd take pictures and look at, their photos and stuff. What is the extent of that? What do they think that they're walking into? Because I'm trying to imagine, are you putting out an ad that says be a porn star, or are you just saying put an ad out that says be a star in Hollywood? Because I can imagine going to the ad agency, those are two entirely different things, and to progress from what you think it is to what it actually is, it would seem like there's some profiling going on there.
No, I love the question, Keith, and I'll be clear. I'll try to provide some clarity there. First of all, I'm not in no way, shape, or form saying that what my part was better or worse than the part I'm going to describe. But the part you're talking about wasn't my part. This ad agency would send ads out, and he talked about, semi-nude or nude, and he worked them down to me. I was at the bottom of the pole, right? So he'd worked in, or guys like me, not just me, right? So video was at the end of the rainbow. So you don't bring him in for video. Some, I guess, do jump right away. But this agency would do the work you just described, which is saying, listen, go here and you'll have to maybe take your shirt off or show something. And then now that pays $150. But if you want to make this much money, here's what's waiting for you. And so he would bring them down the chain. Of course, the end of the chain was video. And that was done before me. So the girls, the talent that I saw in the room already knew that I was a guy for video, and they had already chosen that path. Again, not saying that my part was better or worse, but that was done prior to.
So that leads me to a follow-up question then, and maybe you know this, maybe you don't, because that sounds very similar to the steps that people take when you're pushing them into suicide. You push them a little further and a little further and a little further and a little further, and the next thing you know, you've pushed them over the edge. So because it sounds similar, I'm wondering how many of those people that you knew aren't alive today?
There were, the Facebook and the internet wasn't around in those days. So I have a really good friend that, a gentleman, Tony Montana. He wouldn't mind if I said his name, but that was his stage name, and he's a buddy of mine. He actually lives in over the hill. So there's a few I keep in contact with, but he's told me over the years that many of them have committed suicide. I don't stay in touch. I don't know the numbers, but and I don't want to paint just a one color, monochromatic picture of them. These are all three-dimensional people. We were talking about Ron Jeremy. Ron Jeremy is an amazing individual on his own. Not many people know his background. Ron Jeremy is from New Jersey, and before he got into the business, he was a special ed teacher for 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. Tremendous heart, tremendous compassion for humanity, very intelligent. But he found he had this skill that people would adore him for, and so he followed that part of it. But he never, that piece was always alive in him. We'd be on sets for hours talking and stuff, and he was so you have that background as well. You have people that wanted to use our business to go into the big business, and they figured they could use cameras and use it as art, and I guess they had an agenda as well. But the vast majority is what we're talking about, which is just people that are lost and have a hole in their hearts looking to fill it somehow. And this provided both the adoration and the acclamation that they desired, and the monetary means to consume the things that would numb that very pain and shame that they gained, or they contracted from that. So it's just one of those vicious circle things. But I wanted to be fair. That wasn't everybody.
I want to kind of circle back around to that, because you and I had talked a little bit about your experience and actually your interactions with Ron offset. In fact, your kids even had a name for him and had met him at some point in time. You want to share a little bit about that?
Well, certainly. I have pictures in our photo albums where Ronnie's babysitting the kids, right? So there's Ronnie, taking the kids to a horse. One of his girlfriends raised horses, and there's horseback riding. Ron was a member of our family, basically. In fact, even until he's had some hard luck. He had a heart attack about 5 years ago, and then he had some legal run-ins recently. But before that, even after I got out of the business, Ron was one of the people that that sort of I kept in touch with through friends and stuff. But yeah, it was bordering on normalcy, but even at the time, I used it as a prop, like, look what my life looks like. But looking back on it, you know, I mean, when you think about raising children in the fear of the Lord, you know, that's, you know, putting them into the care.
I want you to share a little bit about where Ron is right now and where he has been. You had mentioned at the very beginning of the show that he has a atheistic and God point of view like seminar that he actually travels around with. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So I was talking about before about Ron, is that Ron never gave up his belief in God. And we had texted back and forth this morning, Scotty and I, about, you know, how that could be. But when Ron had a heart attack about 4 or 5 years ago, I could be wrong, but it was several years ago, he had a heart attack. Almost died. He was at Senior Sinai. And after he recovered, he began to go on talk shows, and because he was a celebrity, and he would talk, and he would find people that would have an atheistic point of view, and then he would duel them. He would debate them. And his, of course, was the side that God does exist. And Ron would use, you know, facts and his testimony, et cetera, to do that. Part of that, I think, is and I don't want to speak for Ron, but if he sees this, he can call me, is I think all of us have adjusted, and this is not just in the business or Ron, all of us have things in our lives that we justify their existence. And so we can continue to do them, the sin in our lives. And I think part of Ron's calculus in this particular time was, wow, maybe God has me in a place like this so I can use my influence. And so I can continue to move in this world and continue to be who I am. And I just thought this morning, Scott, as you tested back and forth, that's a good mirror for all of us. All of us has something in our lives that perhaps they're the cherished sin. And one of the cherished justifications is, you know what, if I wasn't doing this, I wouldn't have access to a ministry of people that would hear this, right? Where, you know, being clean and living a God-fearing life is the only testimony that is not only required, but that is valid, you know? So right now, Ron, unfortunately, was some people over the years had, recently the political climate has been such about the Me Too movement, and Ron fell afoul of that, and he's in jail right now on charges that he coerced folks into doing things. To be honest with you, that's not the Ron that I knew. I wasn't there, so I can't speak to that. One thing I'll tell you about Ron, because I think it brings up some other good points, is that in terms of being everywhere, when I would go hang out with Ron in the 80s, and he knew, you know, Axl Rose, we met Brett Michaels of Poison. I mean, all of those folks knew him. All those folks grew up with him, right? You could not go on the street. I was thinking when I first got into the business, I didn't know who Ron was. And so I wasn't affected by his fame, but I would go to the Roxy or the Rainbow or just walk anywhere with Ron. School teachers, police officers in uniform, 18-year-olds, you name it, everyone knew who he was. An entire generation grew up knowing this gentleman, and it never ceased to amaze me. I'd go out and say, wow, Ron, because I thought there was just a small bastion of people that were just, you know, evil, right? Or not, I don't want to say the word evil, but they were enjoying this type of programming. No, it is everywhere, right? And so
I remember seeing a video with Ron. He had another Christian friend of his that he would go around and do some of these seminars with. And it was really interesting because Ron had talked about in the latter part of his life, and they were sitting down and doing an interview with him, and he was talking about God and the guilt that he felt. And, you know, like, you know, if I died today, you know, would I be in heaven? And I think it's really interesting. You bring up a really good point of if you go back and look at all these major people in the Bible, I mean, there are some terrible things that have been done. Terrible. I mean, look at Paul. I mean, he was out executing Christians. And when that guy gets to heaven, man, you can imagine what a surprise shock that's going to be.
Steve.
Yeah. And you know, this I think really brings up a good point. I don't believe that there is anybody too far gone that God cannot get a hold of their heart. It doesn't matter what you've done, where you've gone, what kind of dark rabbit hole you climbed into, that God cannot speak to your heart. And you know, maybe Ron doesn't have it all figured out right now, and he's feeling the consequences of his actions that he has lived in his life, and God's not going to totally shield you from those consequences, but he's feeling the Holy Spirit's prick in his heart. And I think that is something that any one of our viewers can gain a blessing from. No matter if you've gotten involved in watching the pornography, you know, we get testimonies from people all the time. You guys, you know, hear about everybody that when we bring up this topic and they're like, oh, please, I'm so addicted to this, and please do something on this topic, right? I think here is a prime example of saying, you know what, God can take anybody, transform them, flip them around. It doesn't give you license to stay in that sin or to remain in that sin, but that God can actually win your heart at any level.
So you kind of like stole my whole point there.
And I will tell you, I wanted a place to share this. This seems like a great place to park this. It's not lost on me, and you and I discussed this, I think, earlier this morning, that, you know, the title for what I did was called director, although I was a producer as well, you know, director. And now I have a new title. I'm the director of the Can You Hear Me Now Ministries. And I love the fact that in my previous directing stint, I was filling the hole that we all have, the talent has in their hearts, with fool's gold, with what Satan has out there, with the apple, right? With adoration and acclamation and monetary means. That of course is futile and it's useless, and it actually kills you, besides being of no substance. And that now God has transformed me, so I can sort of be like sort of the alpha of this, in terms of the example of going from what I was in the depths. Not only was I participating, I was creating a world in which it was possible. I was empowering all these people in this pain and this misery and this guilt. And now God has brought me out of the mire across, and it's taken years to move across. And now I'm director of a ministry that actually provides this same hole with the only thing that fits that hole, right? Which is Jesus Christ.
So before you touch on what you're doing now, I kind of want to toss it up to you, because that's really beautiful. I want you to talk about that. Before, you mentioned how there's like a chain of things that need to happen before a girl. So a girl may start off, okay, just take off your shirt here, but then she reaches to the point where she's fully naked on screen. And I wonder if that is the process of numbing someone, or a process of preparation to get to that point. And when we see what happens to us, not just with the numbness, not the people in the industry, but those viewing it, how Chad was showing statistics that it actually, the gray matter, in your brain actually shrinks as you're continuously watching this content. But just as you go down that chain of degradation and pain and ruining your life, there's that hopeful but that you can turn around and head in the direction of restoration. So I'd like you to touch on that. What was your journey of restoration, and what are you doing now that is such in contrast to what you were doing before?
Great question. This process has been a long one. So the events we're talking about happened in the late 80s. I didn't give my heart to Jesus Christ until 2003. My backstory is that my father was an evangelist and a missionary in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So I grew up in the late 60s, early 70s in what I called checklist Christianity. And so I rejected that as a youngster. I realized right away, I knew there was a God. I knew that there was a accountability for my actions, but I thought about it's either hell now and heaven later, or heaven now and hell later. And I'm living now. And so I just didn't want to be disingenuous like some of my brethren. And so I took off as hard and as fast as I could. Like I said earlier, that the porn experience wasn't singular. I remember going my first time in a nightclub, hearing the music there and feeling very surreal. It took a while and I love what Keith and you said about this process. It is a process. So my downgrading from being sensitive to spiritual matters to where I could move in these circles with no static took time as it went down. I went to a nightclub the first time and it was weird. The first time I cheated on my wife, that was weird. All these things, they're in my heart, and so it took a while to go down. And so when I came out of the porn business, I didn't do it for spiritual purposes. Although looking back, I realized that God was leading me and God was resensitizing my heart. I did it for, maturity reasons in terms of myself, looking at my family and looking at where I wanted to go. But God had other issues he was dealing with in the 90s. In 2003, I was broken for another reason. My background is to be nefarious, is to be dishonest, is to be less than transparent and make money and do things that way. And so God had led me down a path where that my world just collapsed in 2003 or 2002 and 2001. And I remember I was living in Burbank at the time. And I remember that there was a church in Glendale I'd seen all the time, the big church on the hill. And I had done drugs the night before. I probably still had some in my system. I put my big trench coat on, my Ray-Bans on. And that morning I went to church and I sat in the very back of the balcony. And I liked that church because it was an intimate. There was not a lot of people going to ask me stuff. You can go way in the back there. And as God would have it, a Hispanic woman was up there speaking on grace. Elizabeth Talbot, it turned out to be, she was the associate pastor there at the time. She's on stage and she talked about grace. And I'm 39 years old, raised an Adventist. And for the first time in my life, I'm being confronted by the love of God who loves me right where I was.
Amen.
And I just started to cry, and bubbles came out of my nose. Thank God for my Ray-Bans, and I gave my life to God right there. And then the rest has been sort of a progression as I move forward, up and down jagged steps. And to your specific question, what's changed now is that I'm 59 years old now, and I realize that I gave my youth to the pursuits of the enemy. And I feel like I need to make sure that the time that I have now is well leveraged, to make sure that every minute, every hour, I can do the Lord's work, because there are so many souls like this that are lost in pornography or drug use and right now, and now we have new flavors. We have political activism. We have so many different things, and the devil doesn't care what it is as long as you're not looking at Jesus. Just don't look at Jesus. You can work on a good cause. I'm good with that, but just don't look at Jesus. And so, so that's sort of my point now, is to sort of drill through and spend as much time as I can, as many years as God has blessed me with going forward, to spend the same amount of energy and passion on winning souls for Christ.
Amen. That's beautiful.
And I just want to put a little plug in there for the Can You Hear Me Now? Because I have been able to, by God's graces, attend this conference many times, actually. And it's a group in Los Angeles that really reaches out to this sort of people at the end of their rope. There is a lot of people that are coming to this conference and hearing some amazing messages and transforming their lives. There's baptisms that happen there. And so I always look forward to actually going to this conference and visiting with you guys. And I'll tell you what, it is amazing to hear your story. Now, when I met you, John, I knew barely a little bit. I'd heard a little bit of this, but I didn't know at what extent you had gotten involved in this. And it just never fails to shock me that, you know what, God is such a gentleman. He's so patient. And he's so patient with us no matter how far we walk away. We've slapped him, spit in his face, ruined his children, done anything like this. And you know what? He takes us back with these loving arms, and then just says, you know what? I'm going to put you in a position where you can now turn around and win souls for me. Yeah. You are directing a soul-losing, soul-destroying business. Now you are directing a soul-winning industry. And I just think, man, what greater testimony does it get like that? You know what I mean? Praise God.
Scotty, I have a new marriage, and my daughter, you'd met her, Ariana, and Aiden. She's 17 now. Aiden's 11. And when she had her quinceañera, my wife's from Mexico, so when she had her quinceañera a couple years ago, there was this thing in the family where don't Google dad. You can't Google dad until you're 15, right? And so at 15, so that was sort of a joke, but then at 15 it became like, what are you going to do? Are you going to Google dad type of thing, right? And so I will tell you this, and so sometimes my wife spans my reclamation. So she remembers me as a heathen, as a pagan, as a God, as a John worshiping, young man or a younger man. And so sometimes the kids will be like, Dad is the spiritual one. Dad's so godly. And my wife will roll her eyes and look at her and go, do you know who you're talking about? Yeah. I say this only to say this. I believe that to my kids, we teach them as much as we can, and we have worship and they go to church, etc. But I think the biggest impact on their life is their understanding of their dad's reclamation. They understand any authenticity they see with their dad's journey, they juxtapose that against where he's been, and they see the power of God to move a life from there to there. They didn't witness those things, but they hear enough about them to realize that it's real and it's powerful. And I love that piece of it. And I hope any of your viewers who are hearing this, and it's not by John's grace, it's by God's grace that this all happens. And that is real, and and it works in my family, in my very blood children as they grow up.
So I have a question. Have you been able to be instrumental in bringing other people to Christ from your past experiences?
I have not. Like I said, there was a period of time between my exiting the business and now. So intercourse with those people was very limited. But the ones that I have, like I had a production assistant that was, it was basically John's right-hand man. I mean, I remember, I don't know to tell you stories, but whatever I asked for, he would do. He's a great gentleman from New York. So him and I still talk, and we pray together. And his daughter got married. He asked me to come say a few words. And then Tony Montana, he knows where I am, and we've prayed together. And I ministered to his wife when he goes. He's had losses, and I've gone down there and read scripture for him as well. So the ones that I have in my life, Keith, I do, but I don't have a ministry to that for probably a couple of reasons as I think about it. One, I don't have the access to that. Number two, you gotta remember, this was not a passion of mine. I did this because, my life sort of led me in that direction. And so I don't feel connection in some ways. And so to go back there after this time wasn't something that was high on the list of things that was natural for me to do. But the ones that are in my lives, absolutely. And to them, they can't believe it either. I mean, you can imagine what they've seen, what art I've been to them, right? Forget my kids. I mean, these people saw me in those spots, and then they see me preach. Like these two have, and they're like, dude.
So I have another question. I think, and you may or may not know, is there any resources besides, can you hear me now, that you know of or that you would recommend to people who are either struggling with pornography, they're in the industry, they're at the end of their rope, they want to get out, anything like that you have come across or know about, and you say, yeah, this is a great resource to help educate you and deliver you from that experience?
Forgive me, Keith and panel. I knew this was going to come up, and I was there was none at my fingertips, but I started doing a little bit of research to pull them together, and I had not completed by the time we were taping this. So I could send it to you later on if you had folks that wanted to chime in. There's 2 or 3 different organizations.
Fight the New Drug is a really good one. Yeah, that's one that I think is, when we started doing research, and I signed up for that as well, and they do email quite a bit. They keep a connection. Mm-hmm. And I know, part of one of the things that gets people out of this vicious cycle of pornography is really accountability. Mm-hmm. As I kind of sit and listen to this, amazing testimony of grace, how God has had grace on your life, I think of biblical stories of other people that Jesus personally had grace on. One of them was Mary Magdalene. And in fact, when Jesus, it says in Luke, I think, do you remember what verse that was that we were talking about earlier?
I think it was Luke 8.
Luke 8:22, I think.
Let me see here.
When it talks about, 7 demons. 8:2?
Yeah, 8:2.
Luke 8:2 says, in fact, did you pull it up?
Yeah, it says,
go ahead and read it.
And certain women who had been healed of evil spirits and infirmities, Mary called Magdalene, out of whom had come 7 demons. And this is the one, in Mark 69, it says basically the same thing, but, is making note that she appeared first. She was the first one to come to the tomb when Jesus rose from the grave.
And I think, what's kind of interesting as we started discussing this is it's like, to mention that 7 spirits came out of her, and it doesn't quite give that detail of, was it all at once? Was it in a row? But I imagine that, maybe this wasn't something that even Mary Magdalene was able to get over immediately. Jesus had to keep coming back and showing her that same amount of grace. And I think kind of part of the problem of getting caught in this vicious cycle of pornography is the shame of like, how did I get here again and again and again? And it's like, you go for a while and then it's like, I'm here again and what am I doing? And my answer to that would be like, go to the Bible, look at the examples of how God has graciously, time and time again, given people, hey, I'm here for you, I love you, and I want to help you through this experience. And so there's a lot of resources. I know we started mentioning that because of Fight the New Drug, to kind of stay up and sharpen that tool, because, the devil may leave you alone for a little while. Oh yeah, you got this, you feeling pretty good? Watch this. And then he comes right back into the floodgates. And something that is so intimately tied into the core of who we are as humans, our sexuality, that's not something to just trifle with. And, you have to be able to take the proper steps to get out of that. So, we'll definitely post in the description below. There's enough resources. We'll put some links in those descriptions below. But certainly if anybody is struggling with this, feel free to reach out to us. If you have other questions for John, we'll put his contact details. If you want him to come and talk at your church, we'll put his details in the description below. And definitely check out Can You Hear Me Now? I think it's canyouhearmenow.org, right?
Yes, canyouhearmenow.org, yes.
And it's really an evangelism school. So, there's a number of these evangelism schools that you guys can look into, and it really gives you the tools of how to digest the Bible, how to get to the bottom of what you believe, how to really start to learn to have a relationship with Jesus. These are all things that you'll learn from Can You Hear Me Now?
So a relationship with Jesus is so important. But how important do you think relationships are? Like between humans, because you were saying that you would look at your daughter, and as you saw her grow, it made you change your view of these girls that you were filming. So someone who has an addiction to pornography, or maybe who is in this world, how important do you think their own personal relationships are? Do you think that they should go work in day camps or something like that, surround themselves with things that can kind of like, I don't know, humanize them a little bit more to kind of break them out of this tunnel that they're in?
Candy, just to break character for a second, I just love watching you over the years. This is exactly your kind of a question in terms of taking it and putting a new prism on it. I love that. So thank you for doing that. I think that's an amazing idea, because you're exactly right. We have a relationship with our Father that's broken, that's altered, right? And so many times God uses relationships in our lives to mirror Him, to restore that, right? And so the more relationships you have, and sometimes it's just one. Some of the people that we're talking to that are listening to this just have one relationship with one person that can save them. That the mirror that they look at when they see them gives them enough to give them hope, right, and give them a way to move forward. And so the more of those that you establish, absolutely, I think that'd be a great idea. I was fortunate, providential, that I had a child growing up, and a father's love for his child. God leveraged that to overlay what I was going through to make sure that He broke his son, away from that. I also wanted to harken back to what Scotty said. This is so important. It's like I'm a reformed cigarette smoker, and so I know what it's like to quit over and over again, and the shame and the guilt, and you start to think that it can never happen. And those of us who have been in that side of the business, or even those who just watch pornography, know that there's a point where it seems glorious, and there's a point where it's shame and guilt, and they're not that far apart. And so every time you go there, it feels like failure, right? It feels like that I can never do this. And if you do it 10 times, you feel that low. Imagine doing it 100 times. I know the folks I'm talking to right now, they know this, because I went through this over and over. It can be interminable, it seems sometimes. But I love what Scotty said, that God is always grace, full of grace for everybody, no matter if it's 10 or 100 or 1,000, wherever it is. And the way I reference that in my mind is I say to myself, we live in time, and we decide that God sees me now, and I'm clean, I'm pure, and I'm not ever going to do that again. And then tomorrow when we do that, we think, oh my gosh, now God's upset with me. God was happy with me yesterday because I was clean and committed good. And tomorrow when I fail again for the 1,000th time, now He's unhappy. And to remind ourselves that God lives outside of time. When you thought God was happy with you, He already knew tomorrow was going to happen, and He was still happy with you. He still loved you. He still had grace for you. So it helps me to remember that as I struggle with things I struggle with, that as high as I feel today because I feel like I've given it up, and as low as I feel tomorrow, that the same God shines His love on me in both ways. And I need to get the feeling from the former day and shine on the latter day to give me strength to move forward. So I just wanted to piggyback on that thought, Sky. I thought that's
bring that back around to what the Bible says in 2 Corinthians 5:17. It says, "Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. Amen. Old things have passed away. Behold, all things have become new." New creation is a clean slate, right? It means what was before is no more. And so you have, no matter if it's pornography or alcohol or other drugs or any other addiction, whatever it is that you're struggling with, God says, I will wipe that away. I will wipe the slate clean. You will start over. You will be new in me.
And also, there is a great verse in Jude 1:24 that says, "To Him who is able to keep you from stumbling and to present you before His glorious presence without fault and listen to this fits in greatly with what you just said, with great joy."
Yeah.
Like even, you know, he wants to present you and say, I'm proud of this person right here. You know, sometimes we do have that distorted view that God is angry with us, or if we just don't do the right things, he's going to be mad at us. But here, this is a picture of God saying, listen, I'm able to keep you from falling, and I will present you with exceeding joy.
I like these. They're kind of long, but I like these restoration videos where they take, you know, a piece of hardware or equipment and it's like rusted and crusty and just like, how could that ever work or be used again? A guy takes it apart, polishes everything, you know, replaces it, straightens it, you know, brings it back around from being twisted, whatever he's got to do. And by the time you get to the end of the video, it's completely new again. And that's what heaven is going to be like. It's going to be full of God's restoration projects. And I imagine that's what is bringing God so much joy. It's like, look, you know, not only did I make them from the beginning, but I remade them, and look what they've become now, you know.
And keep this in mind too.
That is awesome.
Yeah, that is beautiful.
That is awesome.
Keep this in mind too. When it was asked, you know, Jesus was trying to illustrate a point, and he was saying, who is going to be happier, the person that you know is forgiven a little bit, or the person that's forgiven a lot? So if you've climbed into the deeper, darkest rabbit hole, and God has snatched you out of that, right? I mean, there should not be shame, but excitement and joy that God can bring you out of that
I
depth.
think that was in the context of Mary, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
And also,
Amen.
and also what you were saying, we have those holes, right? And when we come to Christ, He is the one who's gonna supply with all our needs. And like you say, joy, love. And sometimes we're like, how we can compare, you know, the love of God, the love of, you know, pornography and all those sexual stuff. But let me tell you, when Christ is in our hearts, I mean, seriously, I mean, it's like right now, I mean, the joy that you have right now is just to share the gospel, you know? I mean, it's like, I cannot wait to make another video, right? I cannot wait just to edit something, or like put this thing there, or like have a Bible study with somebody. I say now is that joy replace the, you know, all those
that
videos.
joy lasts. The other joy is only temporary.
Yeah.
That's one of the big differences.
Yeah. Well, anybody else got any other final questions here for John?
I have some facts. I don't know if I
Okay,
share.
yeah, please share.
When I went to for family vacation, we went to Tahoe, Lake Tahoe, and we stopped at a small town. My first time going to Reno, Nevada. And I mean, I knew, you know, it's casinos and stuff like that, right? So we just, you know, for a couple of days, and then we just drove to Lake Tahoe. And, you know, we were driving around, and the city, I mean, homeless, and a lot of homeless, they're women.
Oh, interesting.
And they look
Tore up.
very bad. I mean, seriously, very bad. And I didn't know, like, why is, you know, and somebody told us, you know, I asked, I was like, why is a lot of women here?
They got
Pornography and you know, sex life. I mean, how do you call it? Like,
there's not a retirement plan package attached to this industry?
No 401k.
no 401k. So when you were saying, like, you know, after a while, I mean, you get to age 30 or I don't know how many times or something like that. It's like,
No, after a year.
after a year.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, like
they're
1 year.
mainly kicked into the gutter when you're like done, used up. See ya, we don't want you anymore.
It
I mean,
affects you for like the rest of your life.
Yeah.
That one.
They pay the
Wow.
price for their entire life for a year of bad choices.
You
Isn't
can
that
see
crazy?
those ladies, you know, in the streets and all that stuff. I mean, it's like really bad. I mean,
And you know what's sad to me? We didn't quite tackle this when you guys were talking about the details of you know, the payment, and that's why people kind of get involved in it, is the money and everything, right? But you know, the devil has put a price tag on every one of our heads, right? He's put a price tag that's like, you are only worth this much. And it's such an opposite view of what Jesus has done, because he's saying, no, there is no price on your head. It is infinitely valuable to me. I would rather cease to exist so that you have an opportunity to exist. That's the price that Jesus has placed upon us. And the devil has just manipulated these people to think that their value comes with a certain number. And anytime I hear a celebrity say, oh yeah, this celebrity makes $20 million, it's like, yeah, but that's still a price tag. You know what I mean? Whereas I don't have a price tag. It's infinitely valuable in God's eyes.
Yep.
It's kind of, you can extrapolate that and even apply it to just the world in general, because we talk about 8-month, 12-month shelf life of somebody using, and what's the transaction? I'm using my beauty, what God has given me, right, to be able to get whatever I'm looking to get. Well, that's transactional, but all of us in some way, shape, or form use that through our lives. And you see that in terms of men and women as they grow older, and all of a sudden their value fades, right? Because they're using the exact same currency. They use it differently, and it's not quite as transactional, but everyone knows how that works, in terms of, the woman at 20 and 30 gets what she wants typically. When she gets a little bit older, all of a sudden it changes. I went through that as I got older. I started seeing my dry cleaner not pay attention to me. I'm like, whoa, what's happening, right? We all go through that, right? Because we put value in that. So it's not just a lesson for those that are involved in the business. It's a lesson for all of us. I love what you said, that we have the crowning glory of God's creation. That's who I am. That's who you are, regardless of how tall you are, how old you are, what you look like. And any time we deviate from our value being derived from our relationship with Him, from being God's creation, we will be in trouble. So
I don't know if we have time for this, but you said you saw a bunch of women on the streets, but it's not only women that are involved in the porn industry. Can you speak to what's happening to the guys?
I honestly feel almost as bad for the guys themselves, because I don't think many of the guys felt like they were, just because we have a very misogynist type of society, and they felt like, I don't think they felt the shame and the guilt in the same way. But this stuff is spiritual. This stuff is emotional. This stuff corrodes you from the inside. And none of them that I knew, except for my friend Tony, made it out of that. They all, and they were much heavier drug users than the girls.
There's actually a testimony from one of the guys on the Fight the New Drug. He was kind of a larger gentleman, and he was, his claim to fame was he was one of the highest paid male actors, and he would spout off all the stats and everything. And he said he so disliked himself, he hated himself. He would fantasize about committing suicide, and he would just do drugs to just try to numb it as best as he could. And he just got the drug. He was literally doing the porn so that he could just take the money from the porn set, literally walking over, handing it to his drug dealer, and it was just this vicious cycle.
Wow.
So
God, they were waiting outside. We go on sets. If we traveled, it wasn't the case. Or if talent said to me, John, can you hire this lighting guy? That was code for, he's my guy. But if we shot locally, they were waiting. They were texting them, or calling them saying, I'm getting off set at 8:00. That is a very common what you just said. Take John's money and just give it right to somebody else.
It just speaks to the nature of what a predator Satan is. And the Bible says that. It says that he's like this roaring lion seeking whom he can devour, And here they are. It's like, you go into this with the idea of, I'll have money, therefore I'll be happy. And then you realize you're not happy, and then you're using your money to try to buy your happiness. And the next thing you know, you have neither.
Yeah. First hit's always free, right?
Yeah.
And then it's just, pain from there on out.
Yeah.
Wow, John, thank you so much. Any final questions? Thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us. I just absolutely think that we can't talk enough about this subject, especially whenever I talk to young people and I hear what a struggle that they're experiencing. The world, it's not just only guys anymore, it's girls are having the same amount of struggling as this. We've had a number of people on our show that would talk about those experiences. I shared with my team an experience this last week that is just like, it's mind-blowing when I hear these things, and I go, they're so evil, John, we can't even speak of them out of our mouths. But then I think about the time that Paul would say the same sort of thing. He's like, I can't even talk about the evils that are happening within this church. This is nothing new. There's nothing new under the sun. It has gotten evil to the point where God wanted to wipe out humanity and start over. And so we're back at that same place, and I believe that our only safety is to get on the ark of Christ, and He is our safety and a surety.
He always provides a way of escape.
That's right. Thank you so much for sharing, and we'll put his contact details in the description below, but we hope you guys were blessed. Please like, subscribe, share this video. There's a lot of people that need to have some light shown on this particular topic, and we just thank you guys so much for all the love and support you've given to our ministry over the years, and we hope that you enjoyed today's talk, and we'll see you next Friday.